Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Kelsey Humphreys. Now, Kelsey is a media entrepreneur and motivational journalist on a mission to break down success for the rest of us. She hosts and produces The Pursuit, a talk show and podcast where she interviews influencers like Tony Robbins, Barbara Corcoran, Gary Vaynerchuk, Brendon Burchard, and others. She offers simple success tips and written articles for Success Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, LifeHack, and Huffington Post. And she's also the author of Go Solo. So Kelsey's one of my favorite people. She's a past student at SPS, and we just had a lot of fun with her book. And I've just really enjoyed just seeing her soar and just seeing all the awesome stuff that's happened since the book. And it's not just because of the book; it's because she's a hustler. But the book definitely helped too. So I'm excited to dive into that on this interview. Kelsey, welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun. I'm having like flashbacks of the anxiety that I had before hitting publish on my book, because you and I were talking all the time and I could like feel it creeping back in. It's pretty funny.
Well, take us back to that moment. Take us back to the first book, and what was it that actually made you decide to write a book in the first place?
Well, I am a little bit different than some of your students in that I found you guys, I had been working on my book for, I don't know, maybe a year or 2 years, but not, people tend to think you have to sit and write out a manuscript. And what I had been doing was jotting notes in my phone, jotting notes in Google Docs, on random sheets of paper, and all of that put together became my book. And I decided to finally compile it and write it because what I did, which was, I was employed and I built a personal brand for myself doing the marketing and advertising. I was at an advertising agency, and an international company approached me directly and said, hey, we want you to do all of the marketing and advertising for us. We're willing to pay me more than my salary at the time. So it was a no-brainer. And me going through that process and being hired and being able to go out on my own, a lot of creatives couldn't get their mind around how to do it. And not just creatives, anyone who is really passionate and very creative and maybe not as good as at the strategic part, and especially not good yet at thinking of themselves as a brand. And so that's what my book kind of goes through, because so many people ask me, how did you do that? How did you do that? How did you do that? So like everyone, if you get asked a question over and over and over, you should probably write down the answer. So that's why I did it.
And why a book? What made you decide that the book was the format where you were going to teach that knowledge?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to stay in the entrepreneurship business space in terms of post-book, which in my mind means speaking engagements, interviews, writing articles. And a book was more legitimate for me in the space I wanted to go into. A lot of people write ebooks and a lot of people write short documents, but I really felt like a true, #1 Amazon bestseller was going to help me get to where I wanted to go post-book.
Got it. And what was your end goal or your purpose for the book? Like, what did you see the book doing for you?
I wanted the book to launch more of a speaking career for me, more of an expert marketing type position. I thought that I would do more coaching and consulting, but I really wanted to spend a lot of time speaking. So my hope was speaking and then coaching and consulting. And as I started speaking more, I really enjoyed that, did not enjoy the coaching and the consulting part as much. And so over time, it kind of morphed into what I'm doing today, which is more journalism and interviewing, which is a different form of speaking. I don't speak as much right now because I just don't have the time. But so that was my goal for the book, which I initially definitely, that helped me get clients, and it definitely achieved that goal. But then my goals changed.
Got it. So take us through the actual writing and the marketing or the launching of the book. What was that like?
Well, what's I hope helpful to people is that I had a newborn when I was finishing up writing my book. So I would, play and nurse and whatever I had to do. And then that baby went down for a nap. And as she was sleeping, I went to my laptop and I just type. Like a few less showers, a lot more typing. That was like the year, or maybe it was more like a 6-month period leading up to when you came on with you guys and you helped me with getting it finished, honing in the title and the tagline and some of the details. And for me, like I said, I think people don't realize a lot of us are already writing. We're already writing all the time in our heads. We're already writing notes, blog posts, Facebook long posts, Instagram long posts. All of that stuff can be compiled into a book. And Brendon Burchard would say, what people want is your perspective. And really, we are pretty good now with social media at just ranting and vomiting our perspective everywhere. So, take that and make it into a book. And so writing for me was a lot of compiling and then a lot of structural editing because I had it all. Then I would write, transitions and intros and outros to chapters. And I have pictures I posted on Instagram of my dining room table just covered in paper because I was physically moving sections around, which, more sophisticated people do that in Scrivener, I realize, but I just had Google Docs and my dining room table, and that worked for me. And then, hiring a professional editor. At that point for me, the editor really was only doing copy editing and minor notes. I did not have structural editing. You and I probably did more of that, like fine tuning the sections and what to focus on and that sort of thing.
Got it. What was the toughest part about actually writing the book, and what were some lessons learned and some things that kind of as you went, you continued to tweak and improve?
You know what? Writing is just like so many other things in our life, which is that we make it so terrible in our head before we start. We're like, oh, it's going to take me forever. It's going to be exhausting, which that's probably true. But we make it worse in our head than it is in reality. And as all of these successful people I hang out with now today would say, action is the key. The action of writing, suddenly you're writing, and your book's done before you know it. But you have to start writing. It's more often our roadblock is to actually sit down and do it. But once you get started, like Seth Godin always says, that his goal is to write a paragraph each day. That's it. But obviously, once he gets going, he never stops at a paragraph. And before you know it, he has 18 international bestsellers. Okay. So I think that the hardest thing is to make yourself sit and do it one time, the next time. It's not just once that it's hard. Once you start getting momentum, it's a lot easier to go to the coffee shop or to, turn off all of your apps and notifications and everything. But those first 1 to 10 times or 20 times, you really have to force yourself to do it. But once you get going, it gets better.
What did it take for you to get going? Like, was there a period of time where you said, man, this just really sucks, I'm not making any progress? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, for me, when I would get stuck, it helped to go back and read portions of it, like just read it, even though you're so tired of reading your own words. But that really helped me to think, well, this could be better. And so then I would, rework on that part, and that would get juices flowing again. It also helped me to quit reading about how to write a book and how to market a book and about books, and maybe read someone else's book who you admire their writing. So we are in an age where you could just spend tons of time consuming about how to self-publish a book, how to write a book, all that stuff, when in reality, you can figure it out. You sit down and type, you hire a coach, you go through it, you're done. And so I think that reading other people who you admire their work and you think that your book could be similar in genre, like I would read John Acuff and Michael Hyatt, stuff that was in the similar genre, same, type of voice. Obviously they're way different than I am, but similar kind of feel and style. And so that would get me inspired. And then rereading portions of what I had written where I was stuck to try and make it better. And then the juices would start flowing.
Got it. And how long did it take you to actually write your book?
Well, that's a hard thing to pinpoint because I had been jotting notes forever. And so everything all together was years, but the actual finishing it and busting it out was probably like a 6-month period.
Got it. And was there within that 6 months, what did it look like? Was it a lot of progress up front, then stalling, then a big push? Was it, like rumble, 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 rumble,
Right.
rumble, and then execute? What was that like?
I will say it was a little bit different for me because of my baby girl, because every hour was precious. So it was very focused bursts of time for a long time, for a couple months. I mean, that's just how I functioned. I was writing when she was sleeping, and, that was like my life. Other than, hanging out with my husband or relaxing or something. But, most of the time it was writing. And so, of course, I mean, I feel like I probably got stuck along the way, and I already talked about just a minute ago what I would do to get through that. And then I think towards the end, it gets really hard to push at the end, to pull the trigger, to finalize things, to make it real. I mean, all your insecurities come out, and you suddenly get very nitpicky, and it's very hard, which is why I hired you. And that's why we worked together, because I needed someone to get me over the hump and to help me with the marketing portion and to make sure it really was a success, especially after you spend so much blood, sweat, and tears putting into it. I wanted it to be a success.
Yeah. So I have one more question on the writing side, then we'll move kind of more into positioning and marketing. But what would be your advice? Because obviously you were busy at the time. Like having a newborn is not exactly like anything less than a full-time job.
Well, yeah, and I had clients at the time. So.
Yeah, right. Don't forget those. So what would be your recommendation to someone who said, Kelsey, look, I've got a slam schedule. Like I'm really, really busy and I'm up to my eyeballs in work and responsibilities. What would be your recommendation for them to push through that, or just to be able to carve out time and get their book finished?
I think if they haven't started yet, they could test to see what works for you, because what might work for you would be 1 solid hour every morning. What might work for you might be 4 hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And what might work for you might be every Saturday for 8 weeks, you do nothing but write on that Saturday. My guess would be the last one would be the most effective, not from my personal experience, but from all of the successful authors I've talked to. A lot of them just shut down and write for hours and hours. In fact, Fawn Weaver, she's a New York Times bestseller. Every time she has a book idea, she'll just take off an entire week. She goes to a hotel room, checks in, and doesn't check out until her book's done, which sounds a little bit insane, and she does it from start to finish. I mean, all she had was really the idea, maybe an outline, and then she busts out the entire book in a week. So, you have to, and Brendon Burchard, it sounded like from what we talked about in my interview with him, a similar type system. And so you have to find what works for you. Not everyone has the liberty to do that, but you're probably going to have your best bet would be a few blocks of time, only twice a week. If you think about it, 4 hours a week on Tuesday, Thursday, that's only 2 evenings a week. So a lot of times, again, we're overthinking it. We're overthinking like how much it's going to take every day, when in reality, it just needs to be focused time, but it doesn't have to be every day.
Got it. Now let's talk book positioning, because I think a lot of people move into they start to talk marketing and they don't realize that the positioning is so important to make sure that people even understand what the book's about, and that you've got a good hook to get them to read it. So I know this is something you did really, really well with your book, and you and I kind of worked together on it, and we were refining it, tweaking it, stuff like that. So talk about the positioning and how you landed on positioning that was very clear and had a very clear message.
Yeah, my book was originally titled like Your Mountaintop Awaits or something like, Your Mountaintop Awaits, Stop Wandering, Start Climbing, which I use the mountaintop analogy, the climbing analogy throughout the book. I'm a very themey person, so I liked the theme. And if you go to my book, it has mountains on the cover. I still use that throughout, but I started to get much more focused on, much more specific to who I could add value to, because without that, it was not clear enough if you're just browsing through Amazon whether or not the book was for you. And so Go Solo, How to Quit the Job You Hate and Start a Small Business You Love, that is much more direct when you're browsing as to what the book's about and whether or not you want it. And so I think also, saying go solo, it implies immediately that I'm talking to solopreneurs, not people who want to be Gary Vee. Okay. I'm talking to people who want to maybe have 2 or 3 virtual assistants max. That's the kind of, and also the kind of person who's, wants to, a lot of times solopreneurs are more like a freelancer, a writer, a designer, a photographer, which was going to be better for my book because I was a designer and I was a creative entrepreneur. So all those things go into it. And then with you helped me, I think you had me narrow it down to quit the job you hate, start a small business you love. I think I had a few different taglines, and you helped me to really get to that one because you pushed me to be more daring, I would say, in my description and my title. But I mean, it obviously worked, and I think it's very bold and gets people's attention. And so I think positioning comes down to, we all want to write a book for everyone, and then the book is for no one, which we all know that in theory, but in reality, it gets really hard to start chunking out. I mean, like just taking a red pen and just saying, nope, I'm deleting this whole chapter. I'm deleting this whole section. I mean, it's not fun, but that's going to get a book that is not only sellable and marketable, it's going to help more people because it's more specific to the person. Everything we do, comes down to the people we're helping. And if it comes down to the reader, your job is to make your book explained in 2 seconds so that that reader that you can help will pick it up and buy it and use what you teach in the book.
I agree completely with that. And it's the old Bill Cosby quote, right? Try to please everyone and you'll please no one.
Exactly.
And that's what everyone tries to do. And you're right. It's painful because you think if I narrow down, if I niche down and really, really target my audience, then I'm going to miss out on so many people. But it's actually the opposite because you can go deeper. So I love that. And I think that if anyone listening is looking for a way to really hone in your positioning of the book, check out Kelsey's book, Go Solo.
Yeah.
Just from the title to the subtitle to the cover, everything, the positioning is very, very clear. So you did a fantastic job on that. Now,
I had your help.
Wow, whatever. So we're going to move into the marketing side of things. Mm-hmm. So talk us through that. What were some of the most effective ways that you marketed and sold the book and really got attention for it?
Well, I already had an email list, I think kind of started, didn't really know what I was doing, but I had read somewhere like offer the first chapter for free to get people's email address. So I did that. I don't know, maybe got a couple hundred email addresses or something. And then I really focused in and made a video series because I knew I wanted to move into more video. And the video series posted to Facebook is what got family and friends more excited about it, which is interesting because you kind of think, well, I'm not writing to family and friends. Well, that doesn't matter because they are just supporting and sharing, and the people that they share with will, some of those people will want your message. So the family and friend buy-in really started to happen when what I did was I took my book and divided it into 10 videos. Now looking back, knowing what I know about videos almost 2 years later, they were way too long and way too detailed. So don't do it. Don't do 10-minute videos. Trust me. But that's what I was trying, to the best I could at the time. And so that really helped on Facebook, getting those out there. Obviously use some of your tactics you recommended, like getting people to vote on the book cover. I did not do a private Facebook group because I didn't really know much about private Facebook groups at the time. If I were to do it over again, I might try that to have like a private. I already have one now that I could use again, or create a new one for my street team or something. And I mean, the biggest thing for me, obviously, was endorsements and guest posting and things like that, which I don't know if you have separate questions about that, but that was definitely the best part for my book.
Perfect. So let's dive into that in just one sec. How about those 200 email addresses? How did you get those?
I think at the beginning, it was just me telling people I'm working on a book. To be the first to check it out, sign up, and you'll be the first to know about it. People knew my story. And when I say people, I mean in the creative community, in the advertising marketing community here locally, and some people, a few followers online, and then family and friends of friends. And So at that point, I was still really active posting on my personal Facebook profile. I don't use my personal profile at all anymore because I just focus on my business profile, or page. But at the time I was still very active in that. So I would just tell people every so often, hey, if you're interested in my book that's coming out, definitely sign up and you'll be the first to get a free chapter or a free snippet. And then as things grew, it was, you could get a snippet from the workbook because there's worksheets throughout my book to help someone go solo. That was really valuable. Still get signups for that today. So yeah, I would say just teasing that it was coming eventually, and then moving into, I'll give you the first chapter, and then I'll give you a piece of the workbook.
Got it. So it sounds like on the upfront, it was a lot of hustle, right? It was a lot of personal reach outs, one-on-ones, things like that. And then as it transitioned, as you got the book out, now that email list is building as a result of all that, but also as a result of freebies in the book and stuff like that.
Yeah. And just asking like cousins, relatives, be like, hey, will you share this specific video I posted? Or will you share this specific status update or whatever, or go like it? That sort of one-on-one hustle, just because there were certain things that I knew would apply. Like maybe it was like how to get unstuck or something where I was like, a lot of people will want to watch this one. Then I would reach out and ask people to share it, because that was the chunk of my book about how to figure out what to do with your life. Are you doing the right thing? Much more universal. And so I would do one-on-ones for those. Not every time. We can't do that every time, but only for the specific ones that really I felt like could apply to the most people.
What would you say to those people who are like, Kelsey, I don't want to bug people. I don't want to reach out. I don't want to, make them feel like I'm asking for favors all the time.
Yeah. Well, then don't sell your book. You'll just sit there. The end.
There we go.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, and this is where I call myself a motivational journalist. So, some of this is going to be like me giving people a pep talk, but if you have a message worth spreading, it is your job to spread it. So you need to get over yourself and realize that you have a responsibility to whatever this book is about, whatever this knowledge and this passion you have. It's your job to get it out. And part of that is straight up asking, straight up selling, going for the sale. We're going to have to do it. Nobody really loves it except for a few people with that specific personality type. The rest of us do it because we know we have a responsibility.
Love it. Love it. And that's some great straight talk advice. So let's get into the PR and into the endorsements. Now, this was obviously something that you just knocked out of the park, and you did a great job at this. So kind of take us through your process of landing these big names like Barbara Corcoran, John Acuff, all those people to endorse your book, and even getting these guest posts on the blogs like you talked about.
Guest post came first, and I started with the most accessible. At the time, there was a website, it no longer exists. It is called Faith Driven Business. And a friend of a friend was the editor. So I wrote a series there. That helped me to get on the selfemployed.com. The selfemployed.com is pretty small relatively, but the guy who runs it works for USA Today, so it has some cred. And then I think it was those posts that led me to Dan Miller, which he's a big one in the career development space. He's 48 days. What is the name of it? 48 days.
48 days to the work you love. Yeah.
The work you love. I was going to say to the life you love. But yeah, so then he let me do a guest post. And then I had a few other just like friends of a friends with small blogs. But by the time I had all of that built up, then all of that was ready to go to pitch to bigger people. So people, you have to think about it like a snowball. And everyone does not, no one, those are words I shouldn't be using. Most people undervalue their immediate circle. In your immediate circle, somebody knows somebody who has a blog worth guest posting, okay? So a friend of a friend, your aunt, I don't care who it is, just to get some guest posting experience if you don't have any. And I mean, it needs to be relevant. So I'm not saying guest post on a knitting blog if you're writing about something, for something, whatever your book's about, only if it's about knitting or the business of knitting or something. And so it needs to be relevant. But what I'm saying is probably in your circles, there's somebody who either hosts a blog or has a site about what you're writing about. And then from there, you build up and up. So I think I left off at Dan Miller, and I went from there to pitching book endorsements. And one of those was a guy named Jim Woods, who's now one of my great friends. And he and John Acuff had a little bit of a relationship. So I don't know if that is what got John to kind of consider me. But then I sent John a video and I said I was a big fan. I said I was passionate about, because John's passionate about the same thing. I was like, people cannot keep staying in a life that they hate, in a job that sucks, that they're so miserable. And that video is what got him to give me the endorsement, which was, I mean, I felt so desperate. And I know everyone's like, oh gosh, you made a video. That's embarrassing. And I didn't care. I was like, I've got to get this endorsement. It will be huge. And then I want people to know that, you know, there was 100 no's. I mean, I was sending book endorsements out to everybody and their dog that I felt was relevant to my book. That's a big key. And, you know, a lot of them said no, but eventually towards the very end, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to send one to Barbara Corcoran. She wrote a book called Shark Tales. She probably won't even reply. And she was one of the fastest to respond. And I want to tell you that in that pitch email, one of the first things I did was say, did you know that the entrepreneurship stats for women is still only 8%? And less than that will write a book or something. It was about women in business right off the bat, to get her pumped, to get her engaged into whatever this chick is writing about. I'm on board. And so that gets her engaged. And I also want to tell you that to get to Barbara, I had to get to Gail. Gail is Barbara's longtime assistant. So I addressed Gail. I was like, thank you for all that you do. This is for Barbara. I hope that it reaches her. Thank you so much. Like, you can't ignore the fact that these people have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 secretaries or administrative assistants or whatever. And so, you know, talk to the actual person, which in this case was Gail, and then write your pitch for that person, like what's going to get them fired up. And then what was interesting, and I didn't expect this, I only sent a few chapters, and people even now who want me to endorse their book send me the whole book. No one don't do it. So a few chapters. And then she said, looks great. Will you please write up a few blurbs and I'll just pick one. So I wrote the endorsements, sent them to her, and she copied and pasted a few of the sentences around and made her own and sent it back to me and said, good luck. I was floored. It was crazy. And so it was from there, I think it was right after that I was like, all right, I should pitch entrepreneur.com, and started writing for big publications, and all of that snowballed into what I'm doing now.
Got it. So what about, how did you get the contact info of those people?
Okay.
To reach out to them?
Yeah. And this is something I'm very good at, because obviously I have to do it now for my interviews. But I research like it's my job. It is my job. Research is a huge part of my job. So on the verge of being stalkerish, I will look up, I will spend hours trying to find the correct contact for a person. With Barbara, she has it listed on her website, I believe, or she did at the time. If she doesn't now, she has a contact form. Contact forms on websites usually go into the void. So I usually say, forget that. Don't do it. But they have worked for me. So if you have nothing else, try it. But that's never my first try. And let me think. So sometimes it's listed on the website. Another great point is if that person, usually the big authors also have a product that they sell. And that means that there's somewhere a customer support email that somebody is checking. So I usually will try that, and I'll I'll try to CC something else so it doesn't look like I just directly contacted support, but I did. And, you know, a lot of times that will be like, they'll ignore it because that's not relevant to them, but sometimes it gets forwarded on to the right person. So, yeah, you just have to really dig and become a Google search wizard, which I am.
Got it. Yeah. And then are there any tips or techniques that you use to really craft it in a way that's appealing to them? You already mentioned some of them.
It's another thing I've had to hone in on this skill. We tend to be too long-winded. So cut it down, way down, cut it in half, whatever you have right now, cut it in half, and less about you. The less I write about myself and whatever I'm doing in these pitches, the better they perform. So the reason is that person doesn't know you from Adam, doesn't care about your life or your success. So what it has to be about is that person's goals. Now with Barbara, She, wants to help entrepreneurs and empower them. So my book about how to go solo was relevant to her. Also, she's a woman in business. So, I kind of tied it into why her audience would benefit, why her fans might enjoy the book, so whoever you're pitching, it needs to be about what their audience cares about or what their current goals are. And so a lot of times people are pitching way off base because they think that person is a good fit or relevant. But if you really look at what that person's goals are, I mean, Marie Forleo, she never endorses books. Gary Vee never endorses books. Like, don't waste your time reaching out to people whose goals are so far from anything literary, they're not going to endorse your book. With Barbara, she had written a couple books. And when you get to that level, it helps them to have top credit, like review credits on other people's Amazons. It helps if my Amazon lists Barbara Corcoran right at the top, that helps her as an author. So think about less about you and shorter.
Great tips. Now let's move into the entrepreneur.com and things like that. You started kind of chatting about that, but how'd you land those gigs writing for them?
Some, I should say. It gets harder and harder, but at the time, the contributors editor, I could find who that was and his email address. I don't think he's the same. I don't think he's that position anymore. And I don't know if it's listed anymore, but back then it said clearly on the site who the contributors editor was, and it had an email listed. And so I just emailed him. I put the entire article, and the article was some knowledge from my book. I had my bio, and I told him at the top, I just released a #1 Amazon bestseller. It was endorsed by Barbara Corcoran and John Acuff. I mean, I name drop like it's hot. Oh man, I am a name dropper when it comes to pitches and emails. I mean, not like over coffee, but when I'm pitching something, I always name drop. So #1 Amazon bestseller, endorsed by Barbara Corcoran and John Acuff. I have written for these other sites as guest posts, and here's my article below and my bio and headshot included. And that got me in the door and sent on to another editor. And then after that, you just pitch to your editor all the time. Now, there's some other ones like LifeHack, you apply online. Elite Daily, you apply online. A lot of them you just have to apply online, but they're not going to, those are not going to consider you until you have either a really great article or you have some other writing experience. So again, you have to think about it as a snowball and start with a site that's more accessible to you and then work your way up to entrepreneur. I know right now, like they are not even letting me pitch articles because they're so inundated right now. So, you have to have a really great pitch, and you have to try more than once. For the Huffington Post, I tried many times. And I wish that I could say I was being strategic, but I wasn't. I didn't even think about it. The pitch that eventually got on Huffington Post was about Chalene Johnson, and it was, Chalene Johnson is redefining success, and it was about how she was sleep deprived and she was overworked, which is Ariana Huffington's like main platform right now. So of course they were like, yes, we'd love to have book. Yes. They were like, we'd love to have your voice featured. And I actually, you'll read about it if you Google, people say to email Ariana Huffington directly. And I was like, these people are insane. That's not going to work. So I tried all these other ways. Sure enough, the one that worked was when I emailed her directly.
No way. And she read it and passed it on to an editor?
I doubt she read it, but she replied and said, we'd love to have you write for the Huffington Post. And she copied an editor. But I had already written to her before for I think it was a book endorsement actually, and never heard back at all. So I think she just gets a lot of emails and responds as she can. So don't give up. You're going to have to pitch a million times. And for success, and this is a lesson in creating some timeliness and urgency. I had a bunch of people who were maybes for interviews for my talk show. And I knew that if I got some real distribution power, they would turn into yeses. So I wrote the managing digital editor of Success. And I told her, here are some people I have as maybes. And I think if you sign on, we can do some great work together. And they care about average time on site. That's what a publication cares about. And so video was very valuable to them. Because I'm like, so if you look, I edit together, either I do or I have an editor, but a lot of times I still do it myself, a specific chunk of video for Success and a different video for Entrepreneur. And if I get more, I'll do the same thing, specific videos that help that site. So, I mean, I feel like I'm rambling now, but again, you have to think about the person you're pitching to, what is their goal. Entrepreneur, they're not lacking contributors, and neither is the Huffington Post or any of the big ones. So it needs to be something new or interesting. It helps if you can say, hey, I read this article and this is a totally opposite perspective. They would like that because that's going to, it shows some diversity in their content. So there's lots of things to think about, but the key is to just pitch, and you'll get so much better at it.
Hey, Chandler Bolt here. I hope you're loving this episode so far. It's time to go from inspiration to implementation. All right, so if you've learned something, we want to help you implement what you've learned with your book. So what I want you to do right now is go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a publishing consultation with one of the experts on my team. We'll talk about your goals for your book, your dreams, your challenges, your next steps, and we'll start putting together a plan. All right, so go to selfpublishing.com/schedule, book a call with the team. Let's see how we can help with your book. It's time to implement. Now, it sounds like a lot of opportunities opened up, and a lot of things happened after you published the book. What are some other things that maybe we haven't talked about thus far that are opportunities that opened up as a result of publishing your book?
Yeah, being on people's podcasts as guests, that was something that people wanted to know about my journey and also the success of my book. And so that was something fun. And then definitely, like I said, the original goal was speaking engagements, and that happened. I mean, within the first few months of my book being published, I was contacted for a four-figure, I don't know, thousands of dollars, but not tens of thousands, but for a speaking gig and consulting gig. They flew me out, all expenses paid, plus the speaking fee. That immediately covered the cost of coaching and printing my books and all of that stuff. So immediately I had already paid off the investment of the book itself in that consulting and speaking gig. And then other speaking gigs, speaking for conferences, which I spoke at this conference before my book was even published, but it was about to come out. I spoke, and then they had me come back the next year as a keynote and MC. And then I'm supposed to come back this year again as a keynote and MC. So speaking engagements is definitely huge. And if you're not in entrepreneurship and you're in something more specific, congratulations, because you will have a much easier time speaking and getting writing gigs and all of this stuff than I did, because entrepreneurship is so saturated right now. But speaking gigs for sure.
Got it. And it sounds like that was one of the big revenue generating activities, that it was like, hey, this made writing the book worth it, even just this.
Yes. And some of my writing gigs now, my journalism, writing articles, those are paid as well. So all of that stems from the book, which was just a big turning point for me, because I decided, after I started speaking more, that I didn't want to do the consulting and the coaching. So I needed to bring in that revenue somewhere else. So the speaking gigs and the paid writing assignments, definitely, those are my income streams now.
Got it. Now, when you first launched the book, did you move a lot of hard copies, a lot of Kindle copies? What was kind of the launch strategy there? Maybe the one thing that just really moved the needle.
Definitely it was Kindle, and the strategy that you had with starting free and then going to 99 cents and then jumping up to $3.99. That was gold. That was perfect. Then a couple weeks, or may have been a month, maybe 2 months after launch, I did a 99-cent push through one of those book promotion sites. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering.
Buck Books or BookBob or something.
Books. It was Buck Books. Yep. And I jumped to number one in my category that day and sold 300 copies in a day, which that was nice. I wasn't sure what to expect. That was my first one that I did with them. So I felt like that was very successful and worth the investment to do that. And so then on my physical copies, I bought 100. I had a local bookstore here. I did a physical book launch where I did signings. And I will tell people the reason for that for me was solely to get video. I wanted video of me signing books. I wanted video of my books stacked up looking pretty. I wanted video of me talking to a crowd in a bookstore. So that was the key, because that was a marketing tool that I then use in my materials later. So that's why I did that. And I mean, I sold all of those books. So, that's 100 physical copies. but I haven't reordered only because I'm not on the speaking trail right now. I'm not speaking a lot, but if I were, I would definitely be taking them to everything because back of room sales are great, which I have
That's
done as
great.
well.
Yeah. And I love the way that you look at everything that you're doing as a marketing, like a leveraged marketing effort. Cause it really is, like, if you're just showing up at the bookstore and you're just signing books and you're not capturing that, then you're wasting an opportunity to leverage that into other things, into other speaking gigs, into other video content, into all the other ways that you can market that video. So that's fantastic.
And that applies. I mean, people will guest post and you write this great guest post and then you post on Facebook and Twitter and all your profiles once that you did a guest post, and that's the end, which is a big fat fail. You need to schedule out, you need to promote any of those little opportunities. You promote it like it's the best thing ever, because that's how the snowball happens. So I had this teeny tiny book signing in Oklahoma City at this little bookstore, but I had a big like retractable thing I bought. I had my table looked legit. Like I'm just like, this is like the best thing ever. My book launch party is like the best, and because then I can leverage that, like you said, into the next thing. But people tend to, plus we're all pretty fast paced today. So we're already moved on to the next thing. If nothing else, just make a note to have an assistant or a web person put that embedded up on your website on a press page. Anytime you do a podcast interview, anytime you do a guest post or an article, you need to have that going on your own website to leverage it for the next opportunity.
That's fantastic. I love that. So let's move into kind of a final few questions. We talked a lot about what the book led into, all those things. Tell us about kind of like how this morphed into what you're doing with the pursuit, and especially like some of the interviews that you've been able to do, some of the biggest lessons that have been learned from that. And we'll just kind of talk about that.
Okay. What happened was I was enjoying speaking and I had some momentum and I was going to do a podcast. I was like, well, I should probably do a podcast. I'm a communicator. I love it. And I just thought, everyone's doing podcasts. I don't want to do a normal podcast. So I decided to do a video show, but not only that, I would go meet them wherever they are because it would be more likely that they would say yes. So I bought cameras and rented audio equipment, and I pitched someone here locally, again, someone in my social circles, to do the pilot with me. His name's Scott Williams. He's a great speaker. He's huge on Twitter and Periscope. And he was an awesome first interview. And what's great about that is if you're shooting a pilot, that means that it may come to nothing, and he did it anyway. So I will always love him and be indebted to him. And so we shot this awesome pilot. Then I packaged that pilot up like it was the best show ever. And I had the professional intro, I had the logo, I had a website, I had everything as if it was already full steam ahead, and sent that to the next round of people, which was my Nashville trip with Donald Miller, Crystal Payne, and Jeremy Cowart. So they said yes because of the pilot. Then after I got them, I got a bunch of people out in California, Lewis Howes, Natalie Jill, Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas. Pat Flynn, unfortunately, he lost his voice, so we couldn't do the interview. But all those people said yes based on, the Nashville people. And so then after the California people, that's when I pitched Success and landed that. And then that was when Michael Hyatt, Shalene Johnson. Again, I have this theme of snowballs in my life, so you got to start small. And I knew I had a bunch of experience on the back, behind the camera, writing scripts in my career, directing photography, advertising, video graphics, all that stuff. So I knew enough of that to just bootstrap it. I was editing a lot of my own video. I was making the graphics myself. I was doing it all myself, and still do to some extent. And so I started doing that. Just a second. I don't know how when you're in Hangouts to shut off your other Hangouts. So sorry about that. And talking about landing all of these interviews. The key to me getting these interviews has been the distribution. So having success, well, that's not true. Let me go back. The first few people, the Nashville people, and then the first round of California guests that I had, those people just believed in the pilot enough. And I invested a lot of money in that pilot. So you have to invest. You have to put your money where your mouth is. So I told them that it was going to be big. I told them, trust me, this is going to be great. And they did. And now I'm able to pay them back because they're all getting articles on Success and Entrepreneur And they never even knew that that was going to happen. So that's really fun for me to be able to email them months later and be like, hey, I got you an article. But it is going to be much, much harder for someone out there who wants to do a podcast and land these amazing interviews. It's going to be harder for you if your show is a vehicle to sell your product, which most podcasts, that's kind of the category that they fall into, that you're just trying to raise exposure for yourself for your products and services, which works really well for a lot of people. But, for me, they're not sitting down with me and then I'm trying to sell how to make a talk show product, right? With their face on it. So, or with, they're not being associated to, now I could start that and they can't say anything about it. The interview's already done. I don't think they would care as long as everything's professional looking and well done, but it will be harder to get guests because guests want to just go on the show for the exposure. I am in a journalist position, not hey, I'm a business owner who is also doing this podcast. So I just want to tell people that to be upfront because this kind of success I'm having has to do with the fact that they sit down with me for an hour and then they get a success article, an entrepreneur article, a Huffington Post article, and possibly more. That's great for them. And so if you can't promise those kinds of results, you're probably not going to get those kinds of interviews. But remember, when I started, I didn't have all that. I had a great pilot that I had invested in. So that's some thoughts. And again, going back to pitching these people, the less I talk about me and the show, and the more I just give straight numbers like bullet point distribution, here's what you get, here's the months I'm looking at, we could fit you in, very short and to the point, the better results I have.
Got it. What's been the most rewarding part of doing that show?
I sat down with Tony Robbins.
How recent was that?
He kissed me on the head. I have arrived. Okay.
Wow.
Because he kissed Oprah on the head. So, and then when I was sitting down with Brendon Burchard, at the end, I have a fast fact segment. So one of the questions is, who's the last person who called or texted you? It was Usher. I'm like, is this my life? So that's definitely the most rewarding part, getting to travel to LA and New York and just see how these people function. Oh man, it's been awesome. Tony Robbins was incredible, to answer your question. I was sandwiched in between like a Fox Business and a Bloomberg interview. He had like 14 interviews that day, so we didn't really get to chat. It was kind of like straight down to business, but he was so kind and he was just very genuine and real. You can tell when you sit down with someone if they are legitimate or not. And then with Barbara Corcoran, I felt like it was this real full circle moment to get to go and interview her and sit down with her after she endorsed my book. And then what was crazy is that after the interview, she was like, so can you tell me how your book was so successful if you didn't have a publishing company? How did you market your book? She was asking me for advice. Barbara Corcoran was asking me for advice. I died. And so I shared of course, I just start vomiting like every marketing tactic I can think of to add value. And then she said, she gave me some pointers on what I should do to move into TV. She thanked me and she said that I had offered her more than she had offered me that day at the end of that meeting. Coolest thing ever. So that's the most rewarding part. And I've learned so many lessons. Anyone who wants to be an author or an influencer or a speaker, watch my show for one thing. But the other thing is they are all really grateful. They're all really strategic with their time. Like crazy strategic, like Nazi strategic with their time. And they put a lot of energy into marketing. Marketing is so important, and a lot of creative individuals who want to just write or want to just, change the world with their message don't realize that a lot of that is marketing. Almost all of it is marketing. So yeah, it has been incredible, and I have learned so much from them.
That's awesome. I'm sure that's just a collection of insane experiences and tons of fun. Now, to kind of get into the home stretch here, got one last question for you, and that is, for anyone thinking about writing their first book, or it's been on the bucket list for a long time and they just haven't gotten to it, what would be your parting tip or parting piece of wisdom to do that and to take it to the finish line?
Well, I would say that It is. I feel like I've said a lot already, so I'm trying not to repeat myself. That's why I'm taking so long, because I don't want to say the same thing. I want to tell, if you're sitting there and you've had a book idea for years, whoa, oh my goodness, we need whatever that is. If an idea has stuck with you for more than like 2 months, it's probably worth pursuing. I mean, think about the way we live. We have a million ideas every second. We're so overstimulated and we have so many opportunities that if something has stuck with you for months or years, then you absolutely need to get it out. The world needs whatever that is. If you're that passionate about it for that long, we need it. Please share it with us. And then that becomes your responsibility and your job to see it through. And I had a great illustration, and you guys can go probably watch this. There's I forget his name, but it's called The 90-Day Year. And he has
Todd
this
Herman,
system,
yep.
Todd Herman, yes. And so he showed that what we do is, like, let's say you have a week and you have 5 days, and on day number 1, you start with project number 1. And then on day number 2, you work on project number 1 for a little bit, and then you work on number 2. And so as he was going through the calendar, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I should work on 6 again. Oh, I should work on 4 again. At the end of the month, none of those 6 projects are done, right? Because we didn't focus on the first thing long enough to finish it. So if you're going to commit to this book, which I hope that you do, commit. And that means you're going to have to take some other things off your plate. It might just be your clients and your book, and that's it. No social life for a couple months. Or, you know, your client and your kids, your book and your kids, and you put off client work long enough to get your book done, because it will help you bring in more work. So really focus in and it will be so worth it. That's something it is worth it, you guys, definitely worth it. But focus in, make yourself focus on just 1 to 2 things max for a few months so that you can get it finished.
Got it. Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for coming on today. I know that this has been a really inspiring and exciting interview, and I'm sure that people will get a lot out of this. And just 1, your energy, 2, just how you've been hustling and all the things that you've been able to do from your book all the way into writing for these sites, into doing these interviews. There's all the things that have come kind of off the back and will be really inspiring for people. One last thing, where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yes. For me and some of my more motivational content, kelseyhumphreys.com. And then if you want to watch the business content with more practical tactics, that's at thepursuit.tv. Either of those have an opt-in for my weekly email, which is kind of a digest because I put out so many articles and so much each week. That's really helpful for people because they can pick and choose which strategy they want to watch that week or what they want to focus on. So either of those websites, you can sign up for my email list.
Awesome. Well, Kelsey, thank you so much.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help this podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book, Published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.